Hi, I'm Scott, the resident watchmaker on the Rio Grande Jewelry Tech team, and today I'm going to show you how to change a watch battery. So let's get started. Okay, so today we are going to be changing two watch batteries. So I'm going to show you two different case styles that are by far the most common. Here on my left is the screw open case back, and on the right here is a snap-on case back. Now I have already removed the band from this one, mainly because it doesn't have a whole lot of flexibility to it. So it was easier to just get this out of the way for demonstration purposes. But before we start, we are going to need a few tools. So starting off, we do need a soft surface to work on. So as we start opening up this watch and moving it around, we don't want anything that's going to scratch the bezel or the crystal. Ideally, when we're changing a watch battery, we want to get in and get out without anyone ever knowing that we were there. So that's why you do want something soft or just something that's not going to scratch the other side of the watch. We are also going to need a case opener for our screw-off style case backs. We're going to need a case opener for our snap-on case backs. We're going to need a spring bar tool to open up the band, and we're going to need a set of tweezers. Now, I prefer to use brass tweezers when I'm changing watch batteries, simply because there are magnets that are inside of a watch movement, so brass tweezers will make sure that your tweezers don't become magnetized. Now, let's start off with our screw style case back. So on the back here, there are notches going all the way around, and those are designed to key in with our case opening tool here. So we're going to pick a couple of spots. I'm going to go for this one, and this one, and I'm going to line up my tool so those fit snugly. Now I can move this little wheel on the back to move them in and out, or I can spin the handle to move this bottom one in and out. So now I'm just going to line these up. So I'm going to seat one first, and then use the top wheel until the other one drops in. And I just want these to be in the little grooves. I don't want it to be super tight. There we go. So just enough to where they fit in those grooves. And now I can give it a twist. Start off gentle at first. You don't want these pegs to come loose and then you scratch the case back. So I'm just going to loosen these up until I can unscrew this by hand. So here is our watch movement. So on the inside, we've got a few things to take a look at. So right here we have this plastic piece that's actually going over the battery, and it's going around the outside. That's there to actually keep the movement in place and keep it from jiggling or rattling inside the case. We have, of course, the entire watch movement here, and then right here is a copper coil. Now we want to be real careful around this copper coil. We don't want to touch it with our tweezers or damage it in any way, because if that gets damaged, then the movement will have to be replaced. Now, if that is the case, this becomes damaged, or you put a battery into this movement and it still does not come on, that would also mean that this movement is dead. So at that point, you would want to take this to a certified watchmaker to do the movement swap, as it's a bit more involved and requires a bit more precision. So the first thing I need to do is I need to remove this plastic washer so I can get to the battery. Now if I angle the watch just a little bit, you can see I've got these little areas. There's a couple on the other side as well. and those are for kind of prying up this plastic washer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of put my finger on the movement, not touching the coil, and I'm going to kind of pry this plastic piece up and put that out of the way. Now the battery is held in there with a bit of spring tension. So when you use your tweezers to remove this battery, it can actually kind of pop out of the movement. So just be careful that it doesn't land on your copper coil here. There is the possibility of it becoming damaged. So I'm just gonna grab my tweezers, and there you go. And it pops right out. Now this battery, on the surface of it, it's going to have a number and a plus sign. So this one is a 371/370. That tells you the battery size. The plus is just like any other battery you would use in a television remote. It has a plus side and a negative side. However, the negative side is not usually labeled. So now we just need to find a suitable replacement. So I have a battery from Murata, so that's what we're going to use. Now with this battery, more often than not, it'll have the 3-digit number and then something along the lines of, see, this one says SR920SW. Batteries typically, watch batteries typically come with both numbers. So whatever battery you're pulling out of your watch, just take a quick look at it, write down the number, and that way you won't forget it, or keep the battery nearby the watch. So now I can go ahead and place this in. Now you'll notice right here we have this little brass spring that needs to contact the negative side of our battery. So I'm going to make sure not to slide it in because I don't want to bend that little prong up and damage it. I'm just going to very gently set the battery on top, and I can actually just push down with my finger. So now the battery is in there. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the washer back in and make sure to line it up properly, because this little cutaway here is for the stem right here. So I'm going to line that up and very gently just press it into place. And now I can check the other side of my watch. And as you can see, it is now ticking away. So last thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and replace the case back. So I'm going to drop it in, and I'm just very gently going to start turning. And if I feel any resistance, I'm going to turn it the other way and then try again. Those threads for case backs are very delicate, so you don't want to force it. Just keep turning it until you find where it seats, and you can screw it back in. Now I'm going to grab my case tool, which is roughly set to this case back. And now I can tighten it up all the way. So there we go. Now this watch is ticking away. I can go ahead and put the band back on, set the time, and this one is done. So the next one that we're going to be doing has a snap-on case back. So with this one though, the band is still on, and we need to get it out of the way first, because when this case back is off, I don't want to risk anything falling and hitting the movement and damaging that copper coil. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. Now a common method is to remove one of these pins on the bracelet. So right here you have these pins that are meant for sizing. However, the risk of damaging the watch around these areas is much higher because they are just friction fitted in there, so you do have to drive them out. What I prefer to do is to use the spring bar tool and remove one of these spring bars. Now a spring bar looks like this. So what it is it's a hollow tube of metal, and on the end are these little metal pieces, and there's a spring inside. So you can press these on either side to pop this pin out. Now there's one right here, and there's also a couple right in here. So there's one right here holding this side in, and one over here holding this side in. The easiest to get to is this one right here. As you can see, there's also one right here. So either one of these are going to be your best bet. So I'm going to grab my spring bar tool here, and the tool is just a little punch there. And what I'm going to do is press it down into that hole to depress the spring. And then I'm keeping this finger over the top of it because those spring bars can fly out of there. There is a spring inside, just to keep you from having to crawl all over the shop looking for it. Just keep your finger over it, and once you pull it out, then you can release and actually pull it out. And just make sure not to lose that, because they are sized for these specific watches. Now we need to get this case back off. Now we've got our band out of the way. So on this case back is a little notch where we can put our case knife. So we're just going to look around the edge here, and there it is. So right here you can see just a little bit of a gap. You can just barely see it, but it's right there. There's a little gap where I'll be able to put the case knife and pop this case off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it flat on the surface here, and I'm going to put my case knife in that little notch. Now I'm going to apply some forward pressure, but I don't want to pry it. I don't want to bend it like this or try to bend it like that. You can damage the case very easily if you do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get it in there, I'm going to apply some forward pressure, and then I'm just going to be twisting it. And that's why I really like these case knives, because they feel like a graver handle. This is a nice area to grab onto, and I have a nice wide blade. So I'm going to fit that in there, apply some pressure, and then give it just enough of a twist to where that case back comes off. So now we're into this watch movement. So let's take a look at it. It looks very similar to what we saw before. The plastic gasket doesn't cover the battery on this one, but it is very similar to what we saw before. As you can see, here's our copper coil, here's our battery, and now we just need to kind of pry the battery out. And there's a little gap right here that's going to allow me to get my tweezers in there to pop this battery out. So there we go. So this one is a 364. So I'm going to set this battery aside. Same Murata batteries. And just making sure that I have the plus side facing the right way. And again, make sure to slide this in or orient it in such a way to where we're not going to bend this spring. Now this one has a little bit of a different way. There's actually a spring right in here. So what I need to do is I need to push or place it with that end in first, with this side kind of sticking up, and push it that way until it seats. And there we go. Battery is in. So before we close everything up, let's go ahead and take a look. And this one is ticking. This is a very old watch. I believe this was from my high school days, but it is still ticking away. It's always good to check to make sure that the watch is ticking before you start putting everything back together again. But now we need to put this case back on. Now there's a couple things that I want to show you real quick. So we do have to line this one up. As you can see, this one has a separate pusher here on the top, which you can see right here along with the stem for setting the time. Now on this case back, we have two cutaways that we need to make sure line up with these two stems. And just kind of balance it on top, because we're not going to push this down. We are going to be using a case press. Pushing these back in by hand, while it is possible, is a dangerous operation. And the reason is because if this case back gets warped in any way, then it will never seat back on the watch again. And getting it flat again to where it will is incredibly difficult. So I highly recommend a case press if you come across one of these watches. It is a much safer and much easier operation. So now let's go to the case press and let's go ahead and close this watch up. Okay, so this is a case press. It's basically a press for pushing these case backs on while applying even pressure across the top. So they typically come with these kinds of pushers. Sometimes you'll see them in aluminum or nylon or Delrin. The idea is that you want to use something that is softer than the material that the watch is made out of. So these are made out of nylon, and they typically come in two pieces. So you have one side that's kind of like a dish, and then one that is just a flat pusher. So the way this is going to work is we will be putting the watch on here, so that way the bezel and the crystal are not being pushed into the bottom of this little dish here, or this die. But what we are using is this part of the case. This is the strongest part of the case, so that's what will actually be sitting on top here with our case back and our pusher pushing into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my case back is lined up. So that is taken care of. I'm going to go ahead and push down on the case press to put both of those into position. And as good habit, I always check before I actually press to make sure that I've got it in there. And now that the watch is in there, I can simply press down on the case to push it back into position. So now this case back is on there good and tight, and this watch is ready to have the bracelet put back in. So we would just assemble the spring bar back in and set the time. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us.